was laughing the last one, but so this is take four. So I hope we can get through this. I've been trying all day, and my granddaughter was going to come visit me, and then it ended up she didn't come visit me, and um, so I keep turning off my phone and getting all my thoughts together and start the video. Um, which I love doing it, and I just find that this genealogy thing is, um, something I've been interested in since I was in my early 20s, and I'm in my 70s now. And so it's nice to be able to have this to go with it, and 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 stay on top of what's going on now in the world, and watching videos. And it's very, I have some regulars that I watch that interest me, and so, like, and I watch them, every time they put a video out, I watch them. So my idea about this, I knew it was going to, like, there may be some changes, up and downs, or something would guide me more in the direction of, doing this. And not that I had it all figured out in the beginning that I was going to, do a certain thing. I have followers right now that are following my channel because they like the stories that I've been telling. And that's what I want to do, the stories. I want to turn all the um, names and the dates and the records and everything that we put into I put mine into ancestry.com, and there, it's a wonderful way, but it's still pretty black and white. And so my interest was actually to turn this video project into more of a way of corresponding, and me learning stories also, because I have put, there's certain states I haven't been in. I don't know as many stories, but I keep learning more. And as it ends up, the Chase family, actually, there's more people. So they would be my grandmother's siblings, and they had seven. There were seven of them, and uh, just about every one of them, their kids, I've corresponded with, or talked with, or they had stayed in contact with my mother. And they were her aunts and uncles, and um, cousins, and everybody had sent Christmas cards. And so I've been able to kind of like sort through a lot of that. And and I and I laugh because some of it overlays, and it definitely overlays, because there's one person, and then all of a sudden it becomes two people, and then those two people have kids or not. Or I thought the biggest one I'd had so far was with the Allnuts. And my grandfather was the youngest of 11. And I just noticed, I keep peeking around as I'm organizing the Chase family, and there definitely is, certain people have a lot of kids, and so that will make it more challenging and interesting. And I also been reading a lot about what what was going on back in the day that like my grandmother was in, or her parents. Um, and that story is kind of, Grandma didn't talk about that story. And Grandma didn't really talk about her feelings necessarily, but she was just so kind, and she she never got a driver's license, and she never had a job, and she lived in a small house by herself, two-bedroom house. And her way of making it more tolerable was she joined a lot of different women's groups. So she was in like Eastern Star, and there's a whole line of them. And actually, I was going to have them available when I was going to do this video, but oh well, the day is exactly when exactly the way I had it planned. But I will get the list, and I want to know more. But I know that a lot of them were more. They did ceremonies, and Grandma would be in these beautiful gowns, and but I think a lot of it was them being part and contributing to the neighbors that needed help. Neighbors. What I'm saying about neighbors is in those two small towns, and and it was small enough that people knew everybody and that was something that the ladies did. But I heard just recently that uh, there was this man that lives across the road from my sister's, and his mother belonged to the same clubs. And he said, "Oh, they had so much fun, all dolled up." And so it kind of made me feel good because, you know, grandma was always home. I mean, she rode the bus for years and years and years until her arthritis got so bad in her knee that she couldn't get in the bus anymore. And so then it became more of a problem. Now I live across the street from a full-blown grocery store, and sometimes with my uh, health, I order the groceries that come to the door, and that would have been really something that would have been really great for Grandma to be able to just pick up the phone and call an order and then have it delivered. And her the way she ended up living her life. Now she came out, she got married, uh, and married in Roscommon area up around the lakes in Michigan. And I'll start sharing some of this data because you can kind of begin to put the story together. So in the 19 I think it was the 1910, yeah, it was in the 1910 census, and that's what I'm kind of relying on all the data, and I want all the data to be there to know that the data is what we're using. Now, I'm not saying it's always right, but like it's kind of interesting in them to be able to take somebody like that. Now, she didn't, she just began barely. She was the one that got me going to do the genealogy, really, because she started telling me about what her life was as a young woman before she came out. I knew what her life was the whole time when she was out, but you know so one of the things I remember that really stood out in my mind was that the town she was had been living in had streetcars and movie theaters and then she goes to this logging town and yeah, well, I'll fill in the blanks about that. But if so she was born in Roscommon, and I think that her this whole name thing that kind of had me going for a whole day was trying to figure out there's Frank Chase and then there's Frank Chase, but they're not junior senior. One thing that showed me out of all of them that did say his name was a senior, but none of all of the other documents I looked everywhere to find was that really true. Was that then one would go by Francis and one would go by Frank, and then one would go by Frank A, and the A stood for Augusta. And it was quite the little project I had trying to figure out. And in reviewing some correspondence, one of the ladies did tell me that he liked to be called Francis, and that's who she always knew him as Francis. So I'm still kind of weighing back and forth which. But in the 1900 census, it showed him as being 29, and then he married Annie, and she was 24. Now at that time, then Annie had two children at the time in 1910. So one was my grandmother, and then her brother Spencer. And so that was pretty, and it said that Frank Chase was working in the woods. He was a woodsman. So when I'd done the history of the migration and what was going on out east, it became really, there were so many immigrants coming in that they kind of started really running out of land for people to be able to farm or build a house and so it caused those people who had kind of tried to settle into the New England states to move further west. And so the Chase family actually went into Michigan, and they kind of stayed around Schenectady, and in which is it's not really central. Michigan has so many lakes and bodies of water that, but from um, Schenectady, then there was this meandering over into Michigan. So it was in, so he was a woodsman and he had two kids there. And in all the history I was looking at, that it was, there ended up later on, like after my grandparents would have been born, they found copper and something else and they started mining it. So they were mining it where they were cutting down all the trees, and so they had a lot of that for these woodsmen to be doing. And it was agriculture, mining, and they weren't really affected like by the um, car and manufacturing until later after that. And now, right now, it seems to be a place where people vacation a lot. It's, none of these little communities are that big. They're very, very small. And but anyway, so the four of them in 1900 on the census, they were together. Now in 1910, Spencer. Now this was Spencer Carleton, and he actually was named after the Spencer that was my grandmother's brother. So, but he came out, and he was actually born in New York. And they said a lot of the immigrants they came to Michigan, and some of them kept going. But there was just a real Western movement, much more even than the wagon trains, it sounded like, because of there was trains now and there was more um, but they people just kept pushing, as far as I can tell, for jobs. I mean, it's just bottom line. I think that's, the people who move someplace different. And I know there's the adventurers and everything, but I think really the people that I have been researching, a lot of them were looking more for a job, to take care of their family. And the Chase, at that, there was a point where he actually, I think, was living in Alpena for a while. And Alpena was logging, again, woodsman type job. But it was interesting because in 1910, then we had um, Spencer, and he had married Edith, and then Ella was there as a niece. And so, the whole, if you've ever seen some of these census reports, some of them are quite long. And they give you a lot of information about where the mother was born, the father was born, how old the person is, what kind of occupation they had. Some of them are not as big, and it has as many details as others. But lately, I've been seeing a lot more of the census reports and they, once you pull them up, then you can study all of it. And I always look for neighbors to see, because a lot of the times the neighbors will either um, be be neighborly enough that they go on to the next job, or that's what they hear about. So what was interesting was that my grandmother was in their house, and they weren't old. They didn't have any kids, and then but then within the next 10 years, she was with her sisters and brothers down in Jackson. So the only thing that there was the retail merchandise groceries, and I've always heard and I think it was the ones that came from Schenectady more. I think they had grocery stores. They were really more prominent people. I've seen pictures of them, the way they're dressed, their cars, and I mean back in the day. But I think they were they called it retail merchant, and then specializing in groceries. So it looked like one of those sons went into Michigan, Roscommon area, which I have yet to know. I mean, on a map, it looks like it's pretty far. Um, and there's a lot of towns. So, I always try to figure out how it's linked. How come they went there? How come they ended up there? So the next step, though, was really, it was kind of hard. It was kind of hard for me to see that he was a woodsman, and he stayed up in the Roscommon area. And then his wife Anna, she moved the seven kids, including my grandmother, down to Jackson, Michigan. And at that point, my grandma was working in a movie theater for a while, and I think that's where she met my dad. Uh, I would love to. I love movies. Always, yeah. So that would have been right up my alley. But it was interesting because most of the children, all, if they were old enough, they had to get jobs. And the mom was working as a maid in a hotel, so that kept in with 7 kids, and then not a man to even help. I think that's like my grandma's life. That's what my grandma's life was before she married and had my dad and then moved out. Um, and it was all about lumber out there. Anything that was, they were just really taking trees down and to build, and it was just um, later on, they started looking at the conservation projects they could do to plant the trees, especially the fast growing ones like Douglas firs grow to, very, very fast. And then they cut down and then they plant more. And so they kind of keep that going. But I don't know for sure. I think that in a lot of these areas, because they've grown so big and big and big, that and they'd never get trees again. And so, um, and the land up there sounds beautiful. And I've talked to people who have lived up there, and it's kind of a vacation for other people in a way, but they're really there's it's just lakes and water all over the place. And there's no big cities around there. So it's very kind of it has all that sporting stuff that goes with that. So even now, it's kind of known as that's one of the things that they do get their income from the state, is the tourists. And I know that the mining was still going on, and I had did some research on the mining in Michigan because with the jewelry that I make, I always like to know where the stones come from, and like this one's getting really warm. A lot of them have healing qualities to them, and this is hematite. And I found that there was in the tailings. So as they're mining what they want, they have these tailings. They end up being these big piles of the stuff they don't want. And so I've done a lot of searching for those and really find specimens, because they're not interested in what I'm interested in, but they're digging it out of the earth deep. And so it's kind of fun to go out and crawl around in the tailings. So I've been kind of interested, getting far enough to get into Michigan. There's some other interests to me, like Herkimer, New York. Herkimer diamonds uh, they're kind of a large crystal, and I've always, been drawn to crystals also, but that's where they are. And then the other thing of interest to me and will be coming up is Oneida, and when they make silverware. And so I'm really interested in digging into that. And I think one of our ancestors actually did at some point work at the factory where they manufactured. And I read something about there was a large commune up there where they were actually, and I can't remember what for sure they were selling, but they actually lived together and supported and everybody took care of themselves. And so those are three things that I am real interested in doing more digging in to get the genealogy part of it, with dates and where these people were working. But I think that whole thing with the 7 kids and the mother, and now most of the other kids have not really went very far from Jackson. They're kind of like still around, and the ones I've been able to do so far and do the genealogy data research on. Um, I know that it will be more movement after a while, but I think that a lot of them ended up in Jackson, that area. They married and got, and then that's their life. And it's going to be, sometimes it's a challenge because they're naming, like the dad's Frank and the son's Frank, and then there's just these two Spencers, and it just kind of goes on and on and on. So the tactic that I'm taking right now in regards to um, what I'm willing to do, I mean, I'm always willing to help in any way. I set up a email address, and um, seeing right now if I could flash it to you in a little picture or something so you would actually have it. But it's Mars at familybranching.org. And so you could send the correspondence directly to that email or my other one. Um, and I'll have to check and see if that's available on my actual video. I'm still learning. I mean, I think this is number 14, those videos I've done. So somebody said you need to do 30 before you start doing it, even, but I think I like doing it enough that, I think the longest I went is this last time. Um, then I just got kind of caught up into learning more about the computer, and so I think that was the main thing. I wanted you to kind of have a picture in your mind, and I'm hoping to get more pictures online too, so that you can see my grandma in these beautiful gowns. And as we come to the end of this, so my grandma was very chesty. I mean, she was like, she had big boobs. And she liked lilacs. She liked to smell lilacs. And she liked rose. And when I talk to her, when I see something that she's given me and I have it in my house, um, I, it's almost like I could smell her. And her whole house had smells to it like that. And they're so enduring. But as a kid, I was, she was 5'2", I think. And she grabbed me to give me a hug, and she hugged me so tight, and I thought I was gonna suffocate. And all I could remember smelling the lilacs on top of it, and but you couldn't have had a better like grandma. I'm Grammy to my kids, and I want to make sure that they, when they come, I want them to have my full attention and do things that maybe they can't do otherwise. Um, so I really enjoy the time with Matthias, especially Matthias is 11 now, and we just, he comes over once a week right now. He's off for the summer, and we watch Garfield cartoon, and he likes some sort of salmon. I always get him salmon. He likes pudding, rice pudding, like and I don't really like it, but I always have it in the fridge ready for when he comes. And then Ella, his sister, um, yeah, she's 6 now, and so she's been in kind of classes and stuff this summer, but she's, great. At my age, it's a little hard for me to take both of them at the same time, but I really like that one-on-one time that I get, to really get to know them, and it's great. So with that said, I will probably go take a nap and and say goodbye. Bye.